Willow Creek Church in Illinois once held 7,000 people every single Sunday. It had a food court inside its walls, a bookstore. It hosted annual leadership conferences that attracted 75,000 church leaders from around the world. For decades, it was considered the most influential church in America. Other pastors flew in from across the globe just to study how it operated. Today, the building is empty. Not closed for renovation, not between services, empty. A for sale sign sits out front like a quiet confession that something went terribly, irreversibly wrong. And the most unsettling part of all of this, Willow Creek is not special. It is not an isolated case or a rare exception. It is simply one of the most visible examples of something happening simultaneously right now across hundreds of cities in America. Massive church buildings, buildings that cost tens of millions of dollars to construct, buildings that were packed with thousands of people just 5 years ago are being listed for sale, abandoned, or gutted and converted into Amazon distribution warehouses. Churches that once had 15,000 active members are now drowning in nearly $870 million in combined debt. Sanctuaries built to hold thousands now echo with the footsteps of a few hundred. Something enormous is breaking down inside American Christianity, not slowly, not quietly. Fast, and it's getting faster. Let's start with the facts, because the facts alone are staggering. Harvest Bible Chapel in Chicago declared bankruptcy in 2023. This wasn't a small suburban congregation struggling to fix a leaky roof. This was an empire. At its peak, Harvest drew 13,000 members every weekend across multiple campuses. The church had a national radio presence, publishing deals, and cultural influence that reached far beyond Illinois. By the time bankruptcy papers were filed, the church owed $70 million. Membership had collapsed from 13,000 to fewer than 1,000 in just 4 years. 4 years. Think about that number carefully. 13,000 people gone, not transferred to other churches, not moved to different cities, simply gone from the institution that once defined their entire community, their friendships, their identity. Where did 12,000 people disappear to? What are they doing on Sunday mornings now? Do they miss it? Are they relieved? Are they angry? Then there's Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, California. The shimmering glass monument that literally invented the concept of televised church services. The building that put Christianity on television before most people even had color TVs. It sold to the Catholic diocese after a catastrophic bankruptcy. The pioneers of bringing church into American living rooms couldn't keep people inside their own doors. Mars Hill Church in Seattle is perhaps the most haunting story. At its height, Mars Hill operated 15 locations spread across multiple states, 15 campuses, thousands of members, a national podcast that millions downloaded weekly, a cultural force that shaped how a generation of young men thought about faith, masculinity, and purpose. By 2014, all 15 locations were closed. Not struggling, not consolidated, closed, completely, permanently gone within a matter of months. An organization that took 18 years to construct vanished in 120 days. Stop and ask yourself a question right now. How does something that massive, something that embedded in people's lives, simply cease to exist that quickly? Because the answer to that question explains everything. To understand the collapse, you have to understand the construction. In 1990, America had roughly 300 megachurches, defined as congregations with weekly attendance exceeding 2,000. By 2000, that number had doubled to 600. By 2020, America had nearly 1,750 megachurches operating across the country. The growth curve looked almost supernatural. It looked, to the people inside the movement, like undeniable proof that something historic was happening. Pastors became celebrities. Not just religious figures, but cultural icons with book deals, speaking circuits, television appearances, and the kind of name recognition once reserved for politicians and entertainers. Buildings stopped being places of worship and became entertainment complexes. Lakewood Church in Houston, led by Joel Osteen, whose permanent smile became one of the most recognizable faces in American media, purchased an NBA arena for $15 million and turned it into a Sunday experience that rivaled any concert or sporting event in the country. Churches borrowed $50 million, $80 million, sometimes exceeding $100 million to construct sprawling campuses with professional sound systems, green rooms for musicians, children's centers that looked like theme parks, and yes, coffee bars. Between 2000 and 2010 alone, American megachurches collectively absorbed an estimated $7 billion in debt. $7 billion. The financial logic seemed airtight at the time. More people meant more donations funded bigger buildings. Bigger buildings with better experiences attracted even more people. The cycle fed itself beautifully. Banks practically competed to lend money to churches with growing congregations. Real estate developers built entire business models around church construction contracts. And attendance numbers kept climbing, which seemed to validate everything. But the entire system rested on a single, unspoken, dangerously fragile assumption. Growth would never stop. No one questioned it out loud. When you're watching thousands of people flood into your parking lot every weekend, when the donation plates come back overflowing, when your pastor is being featured in national magazines, and your kid's program has a waiting list, questioning the foundation feels almost like an act of faithlessness. But here's what nobody was asking. What happens when the pastor leaves? Megachurches weren't really built on theology. Strip away the language, look at the actual mechanics, and what you find is that they were built almost entirely on personality. Mark Driscoll built Mars Hill from a living room Bible study into a 15,000-member, multi-state organization through sheer force of will. He was provocative, confrontational, and magnetically charismatic. Young men in Seattle's secular tech culture, men who had never set foot in a church, lined up to hear him preach. He made faith feel aggressive and relevant in a way that traditional Christianity never had. Then the investigation started. Allegations surfaced that Driscoll had used church funds to artificially manipulate book sales rankings. Accusations of plagiarism followed. Former staff members, some of whom had given years of their lives to the church, began describing an internal culture of spiritual abuse, public humiliation, and systematic bullying of anyone who challenged leadership. When the church board finally forced Driscoll out in 2014, Mars Hill didn't experience a difficult transition period. It didn't restructure or find new leadership. It evaporated. Every single campus across multiple states shuttered within 4 months. So ask yourself this. If the theology was sound, if the community was genuine, if the mission was real, why did the entire organization die the moment one man left? James MacDonald's story at Harvest Bible Chapel followed an eerily similar script. He constructed a multi-campus empire complete with a nationally syndicated radio program and a publishing brand, then secretly recorded conversations leaked to the public, capturing MacDonald using deeply vulgar language about fellow pastors and Christian leaders. Financial audits revealed serious irregularities in how church money had been handled. He was fired in 2019. Harvest went from 13,000 members to 800 within a single year. These weren't coincidences, they were symptoms of a structural disease. These churches had been deliberately built without meaningful denominational oversight. Their boards were frequently populated with the pastor's personal friends, business associates, and loyalists. Financial records were treated as proprietary information, hidden from the very congregations whose donations funded them. Tax law gave churches almost zero accountability requirements, creating an environment where a single charismatic leader with unchecked authority could construct an empire. And when that leader fell, and they always eventually fell, there was absolutely nothing underneath to hold it together. Here's the part that should make you genuinely angry, regardless of your personal relationship with faith. Most megachurch donors had no idea what actually happened to their money. The standard pitch from megachurch stages was consistent and emotionally compelling. Your generosity is changing lives, feeding the hungry, spreading hope to the broken. Congregants gave sacrificially because they believed they were funding something transformative. The reality, buried in the financial structures most churches were never required to disclose publicly, looked very different. A typical megachurch allocated 50 to 60% of its total budget to facility costs. Mortgages, maintenance, utilities, the physical infrastructure of the experience. Another 20 to 30% went to staff salaries, which in many cases included compensation packages for senior pastors that would have been comfortable by Fortune 500 executive standards. That left on average roughly 15% for actual ministry work, programs, missions, community support, the stated reason the church existed. But COVID changed something fundamental about how people processed this information. When churches moved online in March 2020, something unintended happened. Congregants sitting at home with laptops open began doing what people do with laptops. They researched. They looked up property records. They found pastor compensation disclosures hidden in tax filings. They discovered what those massive building loans actually cost monthly. They did the arithmetic on what percentage of their decade of faithful giving had funded mortgage payments versus actually helping anyone. Joel Osteen lives in a $10 million mansion in one of Houston's most exclusive neighborhoods. Creflo Dollar publicly asked his congregation to help him raise $65 million to purchase a private jet. Stephen Furtick, lead pastor of Elevation Church, constructed a 16,000 square foot personal residence while regularly preaching on generosity. These same pastors stood on stages quoting scripture about God's desire to bless faithful givers. Meanwhile, younger members were finding different passages in the same Bible. The ones where Jesus looked directly at a wealthy young man and told him to sell everything. The ones where he said it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. The math didn't reconcile, and the giving started drying up. In 2007, 15% of Americans claimed no religious affiliation. A significant number, but manageable in the context of a still largely religious culture. By 2021, that number had reached 29%. Among Americans under 30, religious non-affiliation now exceeds 40%. But here is the detail that gets buried in most coverage of this trend, the detail that fundamentally changes what the numbers mean. Most of these people still believe in God. They're not becoming atheists. They're not rejecting spirituality. They're rejecting institutions. They're rejecting the organized, corporate, production value-obsessed version of faith that the megachurch model spent 30 years perfecting. And they're leaving megachurches faster than any other type of religious community. Millennials and Gen Z don't want spectacle. They've grown up completely surrounded by spectacle. They carry the most sophisticated entertainment technology ever created in their pockets at all times. They don't need a fog machine and a professional lighting rig to feel something. They want authenticity. They want to be known, not just counted. They want to ask difficult questions without being quietly labeled divisive or spiritually immature. They want to know specifically where the money goes, who made the decision, and why it was made without asking anyone in the congregation. The megachurch model: arrive on Sunday, find your seat, enjoy the experience, drop your offering in the bucket, drive home, doesn't answer any of those questions. It was specifically designed to avoid them. And the generation that built the megachurch movement, baby boomers and older Gen X, people who came of age in an era of institutional trust, who were culturally conditioned to accept top-down leadership without demanding transparency, they are aging out. The younger generations are not replacing them. So ask yourself this uncomfortable question: was the growth of the megachurch movement ever really about faith? Or was it about a specific generation's cultural comfort with large institutions and charismatic authority figures? And now that this generation is passing, what exactly disappears with them? Bill Hybels, founder of Willow Creek Community Church, the man who taught other churches how to grow, resigns after multiple women come forward with credible accusations of sexual misconduct spanning decades. The institution that positioned itself as the gold standard of church leadership had spent years protecting its founder instead of the women he harmed. Carl Lentz, celebrity pastor of Hillsong, New York, the man who baptized Justin Bieber and made Christianity fashionable in Manhattan's entertainment world, is terminated following revelations of multiple affairs. Hillsong proceeds to close numerous American campuses in the following 2 years. Ravi Zacharias, arguably the most respected Christian intellectual of his generation, dies. A subsequent independent investigation reveals he sexually abused multiple women across years in multiple countries. The ministry bearing his name is forced into complete rebranding. The Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant denomination in America, releases an independent investigation revealing that hundreds of pastors and church workers had been credibly accused of sexual abuse over a period of 2 decades, and that SBC leadership had systematically, deliberately suppressed the information to protect institutional reputation. Each one of these revelations didn't just wound a single congregation. Each one sent shockwaves through the entire model. Young people already skeptical, already doing their research, already asking hard questions about money and power and accountability. They watched these massive, wealthy, influential institutions choose reputation over victims, consistently, repeatedly, across denominations and geographical boundaries. The trust didn't gradually erode. It shattered. Right now, in a suburb of Atlanta, a church sits inside a 4,000-seat sanctuary that averages 1,200 Sunday attendees. They owe $50 million on the building. Their monthly mortgage payment is $280,000. Monthly giving currently reaches $350,000. After the mortgage, this congregation has $70,000 remaining each month for everything else: staff salaries, utilities, programs, missions, maintenance, everything that constitutes actually operating a church community. Their monthly electric bill alone is $35,000. For a building they're using at 30% capacity. They cannot afford to stay. The math is slowly killing them. They cannot afford to leave. Selling the property means bankruptcy because the building, designed specifically for religious assembly, might fetch $30 million in today's flooded market. That's $20 million short of what they owe. They're trapped, financially paralyzed inside a monument to a vision that no longer exists. This story is not unique. It's not even unusual. It's repeating in every major metropolitan area in America simultaneously. Commercial real estate agents who once handled 1 or 2 megachurch property sales annually are now drowning in inventory. One agent in Texas managed 17 megachurch property transactions in 2023 alone. Insurance companies are raising premiums on these properties by 200 to 300%. Banks are quietly reclassifying church-related real estate debt as high-risk assets. Estimates suggest that church-related real estate debt in default or approaching default could exceed $2 billion by 2025. Here's what all of this forces you to confront. If these institutions were genuinely transforming lives, building authentic community and grounding people in something real, why did they collapse the moment the money tightened, the celebrity left, or the cameras turned off? What was actually happening inside those walls for all those years? Something unexpected is quietly emerging in the ruins. Churches with 200 to 800 members are reporting modest, steady growth. House churches are multiplying. And perhaps most surprisingly, young people are streaming toward the opposite of everything the megachurch represented: ancient liturgical traditions, Catholic and Orthodox and Anglican communities, practices connected to 2,000 years of history rather than a startup launched in 1995. They're looking for something that would still exist if the founder died tomorrow. They're looking for something that doesn't require a rock band and a $40 million building to feel legitimate. They're looking for something that was never actually dependent on spectacle to survive. The megachurch bubble took 50 years to inflate. It's bursting in less than 5. And when the fog machines are finally turned off and the stadium lights go dark for the last time, the question that remains, the one nobody in those gleaming sanctuaries ever thought to ask during the decades of explosive growth, is the most important question of all. What exactly were all those people actually coming for? Because whatever it was, millions of them have decided they can find it somewhere else. Or maybe, just maybe, they're realizing they never truly found it there to begin with.